the high desert of northern Arizona. The middle of nowhere. Or is it? Beyond the cattle grades and down dusty dirt roads, there are treasures. Treasures that tell stories from generations gone by. And much like the stories that artifacts tell archaeologists, one such treasure is this old hangar on an overgrown airfield at Red Butte, just 10 miles south of the Grand Canyon. This almost forgotten aerodrome's significance in early aviation history in the United States is a great starting point for the origin story of this series. This is Aviation Artifacts, just the beginning of our adventure. In each episode of this series, we will look at a specific artifact that will tell stories about aviation history that are important but often overlooked or forgotten with the passage of time. These stories will lead us to more artifacts and more stories, and so the adventure goes on through threads that connect the past, the present, and the future. Our first episode will show how this series came to be and how it's connected to the old abandoned airport hangar at Red Butte, just south of the Grand Canyon. But first, we need to start at another old aerodrome 20 miles south of there, Valle Airport.
We are in Valle, Arizona, which is about 40 miles north of Williams, maybe 35 or 40 miles north of the Grand Canyon facility on the east end of the Grand Canyon. Tremendous history here. This airport was originally built by Howard Hughes when it was TAT, was the airline, which became Trans World Airways, TWA, as a fuel and servicing stop for the old Ford Trimotors. More history here. We had a Ford Trimotor here that was with Scenic Airways, which really was the landmark operator that started and perfected the tours of the Grand Canyon.
A lot of memorabilia here, but it's pretty quiet these days because the airport, for all intents and purposes, is closed. No services, no fuel. But the memorabilia remains here of all of John's collectibles and what he was passionate about. I mean, here are posters from every year that they put on the Thunder over the Coconino, which was a fly-in chili cookout, and they would have a day-long celebration, taking people for rides, and people would bring old vehicles here, and John would have all his old vehicles out and running around, and it was just a fun place to be back in the day when it was really happening. And you know, in the old days, I mean, before John bought it, it was just an unimproved airstrip, and when TWA used it all through the 40s and 50s, it was just a dirt strip. You know, they never really did spend the money to pave it, and John really wanted to turn it into something. And I didn't realize until I came up in 2021 to start liquidating the collection that Valle Airport was kind of like a man cave.
It was. At Valle Airport, the reason it was started, we were running so many flights from Las Vegas to Grand Canyon. At that time, we had 46 de Havilland Twin Otters.
Wow.
And they seated 19 passengers.
Right.
And we ran the year that we sold it. It doesn't sound like a lot in the great scheme of things, but we did 300,000 passengers to the Grand Canyon. We might have 10, or not just our airplanes, but other airplanes in the holding pattern. There could be 15 airplanes in a holding pattern.
Oh, wow.
And so we bought an existing dirt runway, which is paved now, but it's Valle Airport. That was in the event that if there were too many people or too many airplanes in the holding pattern, we had a place we could land.
So yeah, it was kind of like a overflow airport.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, but then it kind of became a place where, John's enthusiasm for collecting old airplanes and stuff became quite a thing. He also financed half of that building and donated the land for the Planes of Fame museum there.
Right.
And so that in itself was pretty incredible. It was kind of funny because back then, John told me never mentioned the airport to Lizzie because
It's just a sinkhole for money.
Yeah, that's what he said. We didn't make any money. We didn't really lose it, but we just, it's just a place. But it was the place that housed John's collection. And his collection was the manifestation of his passion for aviation history. So let's go back for a minute to 1967. John and Liz acquired Scenic Airlines of Las Vegas, which had no direct relation to Scenic Airways of Red Butte, except for a similarity in name. The vision, however, of showing passengers the incredible perspective of flying over the Grand Canyon was the same. And this led to John's keen interest in the history, in particular, of tours over the canyon, which was the main theme of his collection. The Seibolds also, over time, acquired 50% of Grand Canyon Airlines, which was the company that Scenic Airways became after 1929. So when they bought Valle Airport in the early 90s, it also became the home to John's incredible collection of airplanes and automobiles. The pride and joy of that collection was the Ford Trimotor. I would go out on a limb and say that the main connecting thread between the Seibolds and Parker Van Zandt was indeed the Ford Trimotor. Let's go see the hangar that Parker built up at Red Butte. I worked with Liz and John for over a decade, starting way back in '99, and after that we remained good friends over the years. After John passed in 2016, Liz and I stayed in touch pretty regularly, and when I asked in 2021 what, if anything, she had done with John's collection, she said, "I haven't even started yet." So, kind of off the cuff, I said, I'm tired of the Midwest. Why don't you let me come out there and sell it for you? She didn't even hesitate and said, "You can come out anytime you want." So I thought, what could be more adventurous than moving to the Southwest, selling beautiful old airplanes and vehicles, meeting the interesting people who buy them, and riding motorcycles around in the desert. That decision wasn't difficult. So this place has so much incredible history connected to it that it's hard to even know where to start. When Parker Van Zandt came out here to do this, he had already accomplished so much in his lifetime. He was a world traveler, he was an adventurer, he was an aviator, he was had a PhD in physics. He was an electrical engineer. He was a lobbyist in Congress. The man was fearless. He would take on anything. In 1927, they built this hangar and started Scenic Airways. Now, at the time, Parker was only using a Stinson Detroiter SM1, which was had 4 seats plus the pilot and co-pilot, so he could fly people around, but he knew that he was going to use tri-motors out here. And the reason he wanted to do that, because he was a huge advocate for aviation safety, and especially civil aviation. He really wanted to prove to the public that flying was a safe thing to do. And he thought, what better place to do that than flying people over the Grand Canyon in big Ford tri-motors. They had a very successful year in 1928, and Van Zandt decided that he needed a winter training ground in a place that was a little warmer, because up here it's the high desert. It gets pretty cold in the winter. So he decided that he would put an airstrip down near Phoenix. So he bought some farmland down there, put an airstrip down there, and called it Sky Harbor. So he was also the founder of Sky Harbor Airport. There are so many names that people know from the golden era of aviation that are connected to this very hangar. Like, for instance, Henry Ford, William Stout, or Bill Stout, who was the designer of the predecessor to the Ford tri-motor. And Ford bought him out in 1924, I think, and the Stout Metal Airplane Company became a division of the Ford Motor Company. B. Russell Shaw was the man who designed this hangar and this airport. Eleanor Roosevelt was here. It just goes on. Charles Lindbergh was here. Amelia Earhart was here. Amelia Earhart's mechanic that worked on the Lockheed Vega, that she did the historic flight from Hawaii to the US mainland, was a fellow named Ernie Tissot Sr., and he was known as one of the best aircraft mechanics of the day. And he was actually employed here at this hangar for years, working for the Grand Canyon Airlines. In 1929, when the market crashed, all the funding dried up, and he sold this place to 3 of the local pilots. And those 3 pilots renamed the company to Grand Canyon Airlines. And this hangar was a place that was used until about 1967. That's when they finally closed the doors and moved all the tour business up to Tucson. And when Scenic Airways was purchased by the new owners in 1930 and renamed Grand Canyon Airlines, one of their planes was a Curtiss Robin, which is why John Seibold included one in his collection. This plane caught the keen eye of aviator Charles Cook of Texas, who had been looking for a Curtiss Robin for quite some time.
Well, what would be the one airplane if you could add to what you have?
Mm-hmm.
And I go, well, really a Curtiss Robin. But I go, there's really none floating around, so that'll never happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the guy I mentioned that to a week later goes, did you know that there's a Curtiss Robin for sale in Arizona? And I went, what? I went,
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Because that's what I was looking for before I ended up with this new standard, right?
Yeah.
And
Which you got from the Rhinebeck, right?
yes, that's correct. That came off Rhinebeck.
Yeah.
So I hem and hawed about 3 or 4 days, and that's when I called you and go, hey, could you tell me about this Curtiss Robin? And the thing is, that was a collection of very fine airplanes, and that was the only one I was interested in was the Curtiss Robin, right?
Yeah, I remember also when you came by, and
Yeah.
you weren't coming by to pick it up, but you had already purchased it.
Yeah.
You were just coming to see it.
Yeah, but out of all that Robin was just the kingpin of the whole thing, and I had purchased it at the time, and that's an odd story. I'd bought an airplane out at the West Coast, and without getting into it, we went out and picked the airplane up on a trailer because of some circumstances. And we were driving back, and my friend goes, you know, we've still got to get this Robin. And the intention was to get the Robin and then go get that airplane, but because of some things happened here, we switched it. And he goes, we still have to get that Robin. And I go, I know, but let's just get this home first. And he goes, well, it's just right up the road here. And I go, I don't know. And he goes, I'm telling you, it's just up the road. Just a very odd thing happened. And I said, no, we've already passed where it is, and I'm not turning back because we've got a lot of traveling to do.
Yeah.
And he pulls it up on his phone, and he goes, it's actually 9 miles up the next exit. And I go, are you kidding? And he goes, no, can we please just go look at it before we fly it home? And I go, fine. And I really didn't want to because I was dealing with this other airplane wanting to go home. But when he goes, it's the next exit in 9 miles, I go, okay. So I called you, and that's the day we met.
Yeah.
And we went up there, and
I think I was off on a ride, and I met you.
Right. And it was actually one of the most spectacular days.
Oh, yeah.
It's a marquee day in my life, and I'm not joking.
It was so fun.
because we had so much fun. It was fun seeing the airplane, and you know, meeting everyone and seeing the Valle Airport, and it was just fun. I hated to even leave, but my friend John, who was with me, was going, we got to get back there now and go mess with that airplane. So it really set the temper of going to get the airplane.
I think the wheels that were set in motion by Parker Van Zandt were pretty special.
Yeah, you know, it's your lens in life is very short. You don't see how it ripples down from that and affects so many people. And he never knew what it was going to do today.
Yeah.
And if you had asked him, he would have never been able to even think of it.
Airplanes like this, you need a complete ground crew.
Well, that's what I told Greg. I go, this isn't just, hey, we're going flying. This is,
You got to have a ground crew.
yeah. Well, my real interest in Curtiss Robin began with just interest in Curtiss airplanes because my grandfather had learned to fly at the Curtiss School of Aviation. and had ultimately ended up in a very early form of an airplane called the Little Looper, which was very crude, which was a Curtiss mechanics design. Probably as a kid, what made the Curtiss Robin stick on me so much, weirdly, there was a little model kit, and it was paper tissue and balsa wood, and I tried to build it 3 or 4 times, out of 3 or 4 kits, but the grabbing thing on it was the artwork on the front. I mean, it just made a Curtiss Robin look like this glamorous airplane. So I kind of knew what I kind of
That was
had.
on the front of the box.
It was just the artwork. It never.
It wasn't the actual finished model.
Right. And so I was aware of a Curtiss Robin, and then I got a set of books when I was 12 or 13. My parents gave me for Christmas, and it had a big article on a Curtiss Robin. And again, going back to the model kit and then my grandfather's early association with Curtiss, I would read about it quite a bit. So I had a little bit of awareness of what a Curtiss Robin was, but what really happened, I traded for a Great Lakes biplane when I was 16, and I started going to the Antique Aircraft Association fly-ins in the Texas, Oklahoma area.
Right.
And
At 16.
yes, and that's a fantastic organization to this day, Antique Aircraft Association. Well, ultimately, they had a fly-in in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and I flew up there at 16 in my biplane on a student license to just go look at antique airplanes, spend the weekend up there. And on Saturday night in Antique Aircraft Association fly-ins, they have a banquet.
Right.
And at the banquet, they have the best restored airplane, longest distance flown to come to the.
Like awards.
Yeah, it's some are deep antique aircraft associations. Others are just, hey, it's in the spirit of fun of flying, right?
Yeah.
And one of those was youngest pilot. And so it was actually the first, if I'm not mistaken, it might not have been. Anyway, they give an award for the youngest pilot to fly in. So I went up there I won the award. I was the youngest pilot. Everyone stand up, everyone under 25 stay standing, 24. Got all the way down to 16, which was the lowest number you could have. and I won the youngest pilot at the fly-in.
Right.
So I walked up to get the trophy, and somebody in the audience yelled, "We really don't want him to have it unless he flew an antique airplane up." Guy goes, "Son, what did you fly up?" And I said, "Great Lakes biplane." Standing ovation, because
Oh my God.
I'm flying, their era of airplane up there.
Yeah.
And a guy named Frank Price, who is a very famous guy in aerobatics, first guy to represent the United States in international aerobatic competition.
Wow.
And he's from Texas, and he did it in a Great Lakes, which is what I flew up there. Comes up, he didn't know me, I didn't know him, and he comes up and he goes, "I'm just going to tell you," and I'm standing there. He gives a very impassionate speech about young people flying biplanes. It just went all over the place, but it was one of the coolest things. And when he finished, he goes, "Where are you sitting?" And I was sitting in the back with my friends, and he goes, "Go get your food, you're eating dinner with me." So I went up there and ate the dinner, and as it wound down, another guy I didn't know walks up, and he goes, "Hey, did you see my Curtiss Robin?" And out of all these antique airplanes, there was this one Curtiss Robin. And I said, "Yeah, I saw it. It's really cool." And I knew what it was. In other words, I didn't really seek it out, but I knew dead on what it was from what I've already told you, right?
Right.
And he goes, "How would you like to fly a Curtiss Robin?" And I go, "Man, I would love to," right? And I'd never seen one other than that day at that fly-in.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Well, I'll see you tomorrow." And I go, okay, because, this was in the evening and we were spending the nights. So the next morning, I got up and went out to the airfield to go home. Nothing. No one's there, right? Well, people were there, but no one around the Robin, right? And I go, just someone else talking at a fly-in, whatever. It's time for me to go home. So I get in my airplane and I flew home to Justin, Texas. And that involved from Tahlequah to Pauls Valley down to Justin. So 2 legs.
Right.
Well, I landed and me and a friend who had flown up there were opening the hangar door to push the airplane back in the hangar, and we heard a radial engine coming. Well, at Justin, Texas, nearly every airplane had a radial engine, and most of them were up at that fly-in.
Right.
So we walk out to see who's coming in to land because we think it's one of our friends from the airport, and we look out, it was a monoplane. Well, there were only 1 or 2 monoplane radial engines on that airplanes, and this wasn't one of them. And we look, and it was this dang Curtiss Robin. This Curtiss Robin comes in, and right behind it was a twin Bonanza. And this guy that owned the Curtiss Robin had a twin Bonanza, and he flew the Robin in and landed it, and the twin Bonanza landed right behind it. And he taxied right over to where we were at with the Robin, and he goes, "You have a hangar to keep a Robin in for a month?" And me and this other kid go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Okay, I'll see you in 30 days. He goes, "Fly it all you want." And the guy in the twin Bonanza never shut the engines down, and he walks over, gets in the twin Bonanza, and it turns around, taxis out, and flies off. And we're like, holy cow. Well, my instructor, who had taught, because I was on a student license and I kept my airplane at his hangar, goes, he goes, "You boys are going to be flying Curtiss Robin."
Wow.
And here's the strange thing. This Curtiss Robin has dual controls. Most of them did not.
That was the very first question you asked me.
Right. That's why I ask you, because most of them did not have dual set of controls. It was 1 set of controls, 1 pilot up front, 2 seats in the back. So I was a sailplane pilot at the age of 14. And after the instruction, nearly everything you got in was a single seater. In other words, you just got in and went. And Great Lakes, my biplane that I traded for, my instructor signed me off without getting in it with me, and away I went. So I was used to soloing airplanes even though I was 16. Well, not knowing anything about the Robin, we're excited. We walk over there and it has 1 set of controls. And my instructor goes, "You're not going to have any problem with this. Just get in and go fly."